The Earth has become uninhabitable as a result of human-caused climate change, pandemics, and conflict. The ruling class flees as soon as possible, settling on the Kepler-209 space colony. The colony gains modern technology and space travel over time, but they become sterile owing to the high radiation levels. The Ulysses project is launched 2 generations later to determine whether it is possible to return to Earth, but the first mission is lost shortly after arrival. They later dispatch a second ship, Ulysses 2, with astronauts Louise, Tucker, and Holden. Unfortunately, penetrating the atmosphere is more difficult than predicted, and the space capsule falls on a tidal flat near a weather beacon, which transmits telemetry data back to Kepler. Louise searches for her partners after swimming to the shore with all her strength in order to survive. Holden is also on the shore, but he's already dead, while Tucker is trapped inside the space capsule with a broken leg. Louise is forced to go exploring alone, beginning by testing the water with a biometer and discovering evidence of life. Louise discovers a jellyfish-like critter after discovering some kind of chilicerata, and when she tries to extract a sample for testing, the monster stings her wrist. Fortunately, Louise has a medical kit and applies some medicinal spray to the cut before placing the sample in her red bag. Tucker warns her that a storm is approaching, and Louise loses visibility when a thick fog surrounds her, so Tucker jumps out of the capsule and fires a flare. Louise slowly begins making her way back to the show, unaware that a mysterious man noticed the flare as well. He is the first to arrive at the shuttle and confronts Tucker, who defends himself with the flare rifle and scares him away. When Louise finally makes it through the fog, she discovers that Tucker and the shuttle have been relocated. She hears Tucker shouting for help, so she uses the scope on her pistol to see who is dragging her spacecraft. Louise loses consciousness when another group attacks her from behind. Louise and Tucker wake up in a vast hole of water, and they're surprised to see survivors closing the lid. When Louise notices Tucker's injuries worsening, she climbs up and through a hole to inquire for medical supplies, but the ground is too slick and she falls. A strange figure throws a rope down at that moment, and Louise ultimately climbs out to find a huge colony of pregnant humans known as the Muds. Louise is surprised to see children again. She doesn't understand their language, so she is pulled away as the Muds use motions to implore her to assist the man whose face was injured by Tucker's flare. Louise tries to explain why she needs her supplies, and then Narvik appears. She speaks English and drives Louise to her show. Finding the medical supplies is simple, but Louise discovers that all of the ship's equipment has been donned. When she refuses to move, she is forced to the ground and told to behave. Louise then uses the spray to treat the injured guy, taking advantage of that opportunity to conceal some medical equipment in her garments. She also notices someone has her red bag, which she knows contains the biometer. When she's put back into the pit, she gives Tucker medicine and tells him about all the children and babies she's seen. Because their ship is broken, she believes they must locate the biometer and use it to summon assistance. Tucker, on the other hand, realizes his injuries are severe and that he will not survive. So he takes a solution that he keeps in his army tag necklace and ends things for himself. Louise, who is now lonely, begins to reflect on her childhood. Her father, Blake, was also an astronaut who died on the first trip. Blake handed her a matchbox with 3 famous astronauts on the front when she was a toddler and showed her he had one of his own so they could match. He also urged her to light one at a specific time, and he would do the same, assuring that they would be together again before the last one was gone. Louise's father taught her the term for the many, so she would learn to care about the larger good. The flashback fades, revealing that Louise has only one match left. The tides finally come in and begin to fill the pit at that point, so Louise begins going up again. Grabbing the lid, she begs for assistance, and a man agrees to carry her out and tie her to one of the community's boats. While seeing Annette retrieve Tucker's body, Louise asks to gain their trust. Louise witnesses Tucker's body being sent away on a raft as the boat sets off in the middle of the night, which prompts another flashback. Louise's father explained to her that the humans had depleted Earth's resources and showed her a tree seedling that would not survive on their space colony. Unfortunately, he left soon after, so Louise never got to know if the experiment with the seedling was successful. The water begins to recede the next morning, and Louise is tossed back into the hole. Suddenly, Louise is visited by a girl named Mayla, who hands her medicine spray. Louise ultimately manages to connect with the girl and learns a few words by sketching on the wall, so she asks Mayla to assist her in obtaining the biometer. Later, Louise hears screams outside, and the lid is open to allow a man to lower some girls and a baby into the pit. Louise sees through the hole that the community is being invaded and that many people are being killed or kidnapped. Mayla discovered the red bag, but she has also been kidnapped. A guy approaches the pit to look inside, but Louise and the children escape barely in time. After the crisis has calmed down, Narvik appears to assist them, revealing that she is Mayla's mother. Narvik flees to safeguard her daughter after picking up Mayla's doll. Louise follows her because she wants to help her save Mayla, but Narvik isn't sure she can trust her despite the fact that she shares some food with her. They can hear Mayla's screams from afar at that point, so the two women climb a large rock and learn that the hostages are being brought away on a boat. Louise instructs Narvik to fire the flare pistol into the sky as a distraction, but Narvik insists on attacking blindly, leaving Louise little alternative except to knock her unconscious. Louise then fires the flare, and the men continue searching for the source of the light. While they are distracted, Louise jumps into the water, using the fog as cover, and swims to the boat. She finally discovers her red bag in a net after climbing up, but before she can depart, the males board as well. The boat eventually comes to a halt in front of a massive cargo ship capable of withstanding the periodic floods and storms. The inmates are led to a guard named Paling, who chooses where they will be taken. Mayla and the other girls are taken away while the boys are ordered to labor. Paling then discovers Louise's revolver in the red bag and concludes, while hunting for the owner, that Louise is now local. Paling leads her down a corridor and, after searching her, introduces her to the ship's commander Gibson, who is a survivor of the Ulysses I and remembers Louise from when she was a child. Louise informs him about her ship and the lost biometer, and Gibson tells her about his group's first contact with the Muds when they landed. Blake had gotten along well with the natives until one day when they revolted and destroyed the Ulysses I capsule and its communication equipment, killing Blake in the process. Gibson and Louise explore the possibility of transporting people from the colony back to Earth, after learning that Blake had a plan to build a massive dam and use the ocean as electricity. Their talk is cut short when Gibson's adopted son Neil arrives and presents Louise with an origami space show. Gibson brings Louise to a cabin where she can stay for the time being after giving her a tour of the place to show off the dam. She quickly goes to bed, attempting to cope with her loss by recalling more science sessions with her father. After a shower the next morning, Louise discovers blood between her legs and understands she is fertile and could reproduce here. After that, she's escorted to a class full of Mud's daughters, including Mayla, who doesn't appear to be happy. Gibson is educating them, and after they share a song, he gives them the opportunity to question Louise about the space colony. After class, Louise goes for a walk and meets Neil, who opts for private lessons rather than joining the others. A little tree growing in a container. Louise recognizes the experiment and asks Neil how he learned to do it, to which he says that there is a weird man living in a cabin next to the engine room. Neil agrees to accompany Louise there, but he isn't supposed to talk to the man and refuses. Louise swiftly finds her way to the man's cabin after stealing a map of the ship from a door, where she discovers that her father is alive and has been kept away all this time. At that point, Gibson appears and begins justifying his lies by stating that Blake truly launched the uprising after falling in love with a mud lady. After 15 years, Louise is finally permitted inside and reunited with her father. She is disappointed that her father has abandoned the expedition and abandoned his daughter, but Blake argues that the Kepler residents should never return to Earth, stating that he must halt the mistakes. Louise, distraught, flees the room. Later, when the tide is high, Louise sees the weather station, where they may attach the biometer and contact Kepler. She chooses to tell Gibson that she is fertile in order to provide the necessary evidence, and Gibson agrees to locate the biometer. Then Louise is invited to dinner, and Neil's mother Monet tells Louise about Gibson finding her while she was giving birth and saving Neil's life because he was born with his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. They connected that day, and Gibson accepted them as his family. Suddenly, the power goes out, and Pauling informs Gibson that an intruder has taken out the guards in order to gain access to the power box. Louise takes a hallway back to her cabin, only to be stopped by the intruder, who holds a knife to her throat and injures her. The intruder is subsequently shown to be Narvik, who is hunting for her daughter. Louise takes Narvik to meet Mayla, but the moment they walk into the girls' room, they are surrounded by guards. While Mayla cries out for her mother, The ladies try to fight them, but Paling appears and kicks Narvik, knowing her name. Paling then orders his men to take Narvik away, but before she does so, she tells Louise that they only take the girls and drops Mayla's doll. After that, power is restored, and Monet cures Louise's wound as she suddenly claims to have his eyes. Louise examines the posters on the wall and discovers that they all feature photographs of pregnant women. Gibson arrives to check on her and informs her that Narvik was one of the guards that turned against him during the revolt. They talk about it, and Louise realizes that the girls are being held hostage for Gibson's future breeding plans. Louise is disgusted, but appears to be Gibson's supporter in order to avoid arrest as well. Paling walks in with the red bag, but when Gibson opens it, the biometer is missing. He dismisses Louise and instructs Paling to keep a watch on her before turning to his kid, who displays a toy he discovered. Gibson then discovers that the biometer is housed within the doll. When Louise returns to her room, she hears a disturbance and discovers Mayla hiding in her closet, but Paling comes on her door and forces his way in since he heard a child is missing. He glances around fast and doesn't find Mayla, so instead of leaving, he starts hitting on Louise, unconcerned about her rejection. He puts her against the wall after some effort, but before he can take advantage of her, he hears a commotion coming from the closet. Louise runs to Paling and distracts him with a kiss as he moves to investigate. Paling begins to shake and falls to the ground as he dies as a result of Louise slipping the poison capsule from her army tag necklace into his mouth. After that, Louise takes Paling's weapon and begins sneaking around the ship with Mayla. When they come upon a guard, Mayla diverts his attention and Louise knocks him out from behind. Then they arrive at the cell where all the convicts who are used as work slates are kept. Narvik arrives, and Louise hands her the guard's weapon before she flees with the others. While the prisoners are rescuing the girls, Louise rushes to see Blake, who shows her something through the window. Gibson is going to the weather station with Neil and Monet, which is unusual because he never leaves the ship. Then Louise finds the doll Neil gave Blake and thinks Gibson is in possession of the biometer. She is perplexed as to what proof Gibson will send without her there, and Blake says Neil is not a mud. Louise accepts Gibson's offer to stop him, and Blake tells her that he never lighted his last match. Meanwhile, the Munts flee the ship while escaping guards shooting. Louise joins them and shoots a few men before the group flees into the open, where more guards murder a number of them. Louise shoots any guards who get too close and assists the gang in reaching a boat before diving into the ocean to swim to the weather station. Gibson has stolen Neil's blood and is about to deliver the message when Louise appears and threatens him with her weapon. Gibson reacts by pointing a gun at Neil, indicating that he is Blake's son and hence her half-brother. Monet tries to defend her son, but Gibson shoots her in the head instead. Gibson instantly uploads the data to Kepler via the biometer when Louise lowers her weapon to save Neil from the same fate. Because he's preoccupied, Louise takes advantage of the opportunity to tackle him into the water, then strangles and drowns Gibson, nearly drowning herself in the process. Fortunately, Narvik comes to her aid and performs CPR on her. Louise and Blake rejoin the Muds, and they all set sail in a tugboat. Neil is mourning the loss of his mother, so Louise visits him and gives him her matchbox as a symbol of hope. Moments later, a group of youngsters are playing in the settlement's backyard when they become alarmed when they spot figures in the fog. They perk up when they realize it's their kidnapped parents who have finally escaped Gibson's clutches.